The frame opens on a hospital room drowned in harsh, white light. My face is hidden beneath bandages, the scent of antiseptic clings to everything. A heart monitor ticks in the background like a metronome of regret. I turn my head slightly, looking directly into the lens, voice hoarse but steady. The night I suffered blistering burns, he chose Emily. He thought I'd forgive, but I didn't. This is how my story began. I used to think pain had a sound, a scream, a sob, the crash of breaking glass. But real pain, the kind that changes you, is often silent. It settles into the small spaces of your life and sits there until you're forced to face it. Before the fire, my life looked perfect from the outside. A warm apartment decorated with my careful touch, a husband who dazzled at parties, photos of us smiling on vacation pinned to the fridge. People would look at us and say, "You're so lucky." I would nod, believing them. Daniel and I had met when we were still young enough to confuse intensity with permanence. He was the golden boy at the firm where I worked as an assistant, confident, brilliant, his laughter echoing down the hallways like a promise. I was quieter, the one who stayed late to finish reports, who remembered birthdays and favorite coffees. He said I grounded him. I believed him. When we married, I thought my steadiness and his spark would be a perfect match, like water and fire coexisting. But over the years, water can't always contain fire. The night of the fundraiser gala was supposed to be a milestone for me. I'd been promoted to lead coordinator for the Children's Hospital charity, and this was my first major event. For weeks I poured every ounce of myself into planning, choosing fabrics, centerpieces, and lighting to transform a cold municipal auditorium into a shimmering winter garden. Daniel promised he would be there to support me, to clap the loudest when the board thanked me. He even joked about buying me a gown worthy of a movie star. But from the moment we arrived, I could see his attention slipping. Emily was new to the hospital's PR team, tall, elegant, with a voice like warm honey. She and Daniel shared a history from a previous job, something he'd only vaguely mentioned. I told myself I was imagining the way he leaned in when she spoke, how his hand hovered near hers as they laughed at some private joke. My chest tightened but I smiled through it, welcoming donors, adjusting place cards, fixing small problems before they erupted. Hours into the evening, as guests twirled on the dance floor under the glow of fairy lights, a volunteer whispered to me about a strange smell near the catering station. I slipped away, heels clicking across the polished floor, and ducked behind the heavy curtains to investigate. The scent of burning plastic hit me first, then I saw the flicker of orange. A faulty extension cord had sparked, and the drapes had caught fire. I shouted for help, but the band drowned out my voice. Instinct took over. Without thinking, I grabbed the curtain and tried to pull it down before the flames could spread. The fabric was heavier than I expected. It shifted, twisting, and suddenly my sleeve brushed against the fire. In a flash my dress ignited. Heat engulfed me. The pain was instant and searing, like every nerve had been exposed to boiling water. I screamed for Daniel. Through the haze of smoke and panic, I glimpsed him across the hall. He had Emily by the hand, shielding her as he ushered her toward the exit. Our eyes met for a split second. I will never forget that moment, the flicker of recognition, the fear, and then the decision. He turned away. No one came for me until a security guard noticed, grabbing a fire blanket and tackling the flames on my dress. He pressed me to the ground, smothering the fire while others screamed and rushed for safety. My vision blurred, the world narrowed to pain and the acrid sting of smoke. By the time paramedics lifted me onto a stretcher, I had burns blistering up my arms and across my shoulder. I searched for Daniel as they wheeled me out, my heart pounding with hope and disbelief. But in the parking lot, under the harsh glare of emergency lights, I saw him holding Emily. She was crying into his chest, and his arms wrapped protectively around her. He didn't look up. The ambulance doors slammed shut. At the hospital, time melted into a slow, numbing loop. Morphine dulled the pain in my skin but sharpened the ache inside. Nurses came and went, changing dressings, murmuring encouragement. My reflection became a stranger, bandages covering the person I used to be. Daniel came once, 2 days after the fire, carrying flowers that wilted before I could put them in water. He sat stiffly in the visitor's chair, guilt flickering across his face like a shadow. I panicked, he said, voice breaking. I thought you were right behind me. Emily was terrified. She's never seen a fire up close. I stared at him, words sticking in my throat. He reached for my bandaged hand but stopped short, as if afraid to touch me. "I'll be here for everything," he whispered. "Every surgery, every therapy session. We'll get through this." But, quickly. Emily, he told me on the phone later, was having nightmares. She couldn't sleep alone. She needed someone to talk to, someone who understood. He couldn't let her down. "You're strong," he said, as if strength was a substitute for love. "You'll be okay until I can visit again." Days turned into weeks. My scars began to heal, but my trust did not. The nurses became my family, their quiet efficiency a balm. In physical therapy, I met Grace, a middle-aged therapist with kind eyes and a no-nonsense tone. She coaxed my stiff arms to stretch, my fingers to grip again, my body to reclaim movement despite the pain. One afternoon, as she massaged scar tissue, she said softly, "Sometimes the fire doesn't destroy you, it shows you who won't walk through flames for you." Her words lodged deep inside me. At night, alone in my room, I replayed the moment in the hall over and over. The smoke, the flames, Daniel's back as he guided Emily out. My scream swallowed by chaos. I wanted to believe he'd made a mistake. But each unanswered text, each postponed visit, each excuse built a wall between us. I began to picture life without him, not as a threat or a tragedy, but as a possibility. A quiet apartment where no one forgot my needs. A morning where the first person I thought of was me. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. One night, weeks after the fire, I peeled away my own bandages for the first time. Angry red scars marred my once smooth skin, a map of everything I'd survived. My reflection didn't look like the woman Daniel had married. She looked fiercer, raw, real. I touched the scars lightly, wincing, and whispered to my reflection, "You're still here." In that moment, a seed of resolve took root. Daniel visited again, late and distracted. He talked about Emily's recovery more than mine. "She's still shaken up," he said, rubbing his temples. "She keeps blaming herself for the fire, thinking she did something wrong with the cords." I asked quietly, "Do you blame her?" He shrugged. "It doesn't matter. What matters is helping her heal. You're stronger." The words stung like salt on raw skin. He wasn't even aware of the insult, he said it as if it were a compliment. After he left, the room felt emptier than before he came. That was when I knew I couldn't wait for him to choose me. I had to choose myself. From then on, I threw myself into therapy with new determination. Each stretch, each painful movement became not just physical healing but a rehearsal for leaving. I learned to button my shirts with stiff fingers, to carry my bag despite the pull of scars, to walk a little farther down the corridor each day. Grace noticed the change and smiled without asking questions. "You're almost ready," she said one morning as we finished our session. "Ready for what?" I asked, feigning ignorance. She only gave me a knowing look. The night before I was discharged, I sat by the window of my hospital room, watching city lights flicker below. My phone buzzed with another message from Daniel. He couldn't make it to pick me up tomorrow. Emily needed him. I turned the phone over, screen down, and stared at my reflection in the dark glass. Bandages off now, hair tied back, hospital gown loose around my frame. My scars caught the faint light, pale and stubborn. I realized I wasn't waiting for a rescue anymore. Outside, an ambulance siren wailed and faded into the night. Inside, something in me settled. This was the end of the life I had known, and the beginning of something else. Soft piano plays over footage of me walking out of the hospital doors into sunlight. My arm is still bandaged but my back is straight. I turned slightly, eyes meeting the lens, voice steadier now. He thought my scars would keep me. He thought I'd forgive and stay. But sometimes pain is the doorway to freedom. Watch how I rebuilt myself. The day I left Daniel was quieter than I ever imagined it would be. No confrontation, no shouting, no thrown suitcases. Just the hush of early morning as I packed my bag, the soft rustle of clothes, the clicking of the zipper that closed a chapter of my life. My discharge papers lay folded on the nightstand. I was officially free to go, and yet the hardest part wasn't walking out of the hospital. It was walking away from a marriage I had once believed was unbreakable. Daniel had texted late the night before to say he wouldn't be able to pick me up. Emily had another panic attack, he wrote. She needed him. There was a time when reading those words would have made me cry, now I just felt a hollow calm. If he couldn't be there for me at my lowest, he didn't deserve to be there at my rising. I dressed slowly, fingers still stiff from the grafts but determined. Each movement, pulling on a soft long-sleeved shirt that wouldn't irritate my skin, sliding my feet into sneakers, felt like an act of reclaiming my own body. The hospital's automatic doors parted with a hiss. Outside, the air was cool and bright. For a moment I just stood there, breathing it in. For the first time since the fire, I felt the sunlight on my face without flinching. A taxi idled at the curb. The driver, an older man with gentle eyes, hopped out to help with my bag. He didn't stare at the visible scars on my hands, he just asked, "Where to?" I gave him my sister Leah's address in another city and settled into the back seat. As the hospital receded in the mirror, a lump rose in my throat, but it wasn't grief. It was relief. Leah opened the door before I even rang the bell. She wrapped her arms around me carefully, mindful of my healing skin, and whispered, "You're safe now." Her apartment was small and cluttered but warm, full of the smell of fresh coffee and the sound of her toddler playing with blocks. That night, lying on her sofa under a borrowed quilt, I realized how long it had been since someone held me without needing anything in return. The first weeks were a blur of sleep, follow-up appointments, and awkward adjustments. I had to learn to live with my new reflection, pulling my hair back in a way that didn't draw attention to the scars, experimenting with creams and sleeves. But Leah never let me sink into shame. She left sticky notes on the bathroom mirror, "Beautiful, brave, still you." Slowly, the words began to seep into my skin. Daniel called at first, angry, then pleading, then resigned. "You're being dramatic," he said once. "We can get through this." Another time, "I can't just abandon Emily, she's fragile." His excuses felt like cold drafts sneaking under a closed door. I didn't argue. I just listened, then hung up. The man who had once been my world was now just a voice on a line I no longer wanted to answer. My counselor at the burn center introduced me to a support group for survivors. Every Thursday evening we gathered in a circle of mismatched chairs in a church basement. There were veterans, accident victims, and a young mother burned in a kitchen fire. We shared our stories, our fears, our small victories. In that circle I learned a new kind of courage, not the dramatic kind that runs into flames, but the quiet kind that wakes up every day and chooses to heal. One evening after group, I sat in a coffee shop with a notebook and wrote a list of things I'd once dreamed of doing. Start my own design business, travel alone, speak at events, run a marathon or at least a 5K. The list looked impossible, but also thrilling. For years my identity had been tethered to Daniel's moods and ambitions. Now there was only me, and the wide-open question of what came next. Money was tight. I picked up part-time remote work, sketching layouts for small offices and cafes. My scars made in-person interviews uncomfortable, but online no one saw them unless I wanted them to. With each project I completed, my confidence grew. I began to imagine my own studio, a place where survivors could come for affordable design help to make their spaces feel like sanctuaries. The idea glowed in my mind like an ember refusing to die. Daniel's messages dwindled. Then one day, a mutual friend sent me a link to a society page. Daniel and Emily at another gala, her hand on his chest, his arm around her waist. The caption called them a power couple. I stared at the photo, waiting for the sting, but it never came. Instead I felt a cool, distant gratitude. He had freed me by revealing who he truly was. My own life blossomed in unexpected ways. Leah's toddler became my little shadow, following me around with crayons. We built blanket forts, and he called my scars superhero marks. That simple innocence softened something inside me. At night, when Leah fell asleep, I sketched business plans on her kitchen table, coffee growing cold at my elbow. I was rebuilding not just a career but a sense of self. 6 months after the fire, my counselor invited me to speak at a local event for trauma survivors. At first I refused. "I'm not ready," I said. "I'm still figuring everything out." She smiled gently. "That's exactly why you should speak. People don't need perfection. They need honesty." I thought about Grace, my physical therapist, and her quiet wisdom. Maybe she was right. The night of the event, I wore a simple black dress with sleeves rolled up deliberately. My scars were pale now, but still visible. As I stepped onto the small stage, the lights felt warm but not threatening. I took a deep breath and began. 6 months ago I believed my life was over. I was burned, physically, emotionally. The man I loved chose someone else while I was in pain. I thought my scars defined me. But I've learned something. Scars don't define you. They remind you that you survived. The room went silent, then someone started clapping, then everyone. Afterward, people lined up to hug me, to tell me their stories. A young woman whispered, "I thought I was too broken to leave. You showed me I'm not." Her words felt like a mirror reflecting back the truth I'd been living into. Walking home from the event, city lights shimmering on wet pavement, I realized something profound. I no longer feared fire. It had burned away not my worth but my illusions. In losing Daniel, I had gained myself. Back at Leah's, I lit a single candle on the windowsill. Its flame danced gently, safe behind glass. I watched it flicker and thought of that night at the gala, of the moment everything changed. For so long I'd believed my life ended in those flames. But looking at the candle now, I understood. That was the night my real life began. Over the next year, I launched my online consultancy officially, calling it Phoenix Spaces. Clients came slowly at first, then steadily. Survivors, single parents, people starting over after loss, they all wanted homes that felt like havens. Each project was a collaboration, a shared act of rebuilding. The business grew enough for me to rent a tiny studio of my own. I painted the walls a soft, hopeful yellow and pinned my support group friends' quotes on a corkboard. I also began traveling, first short trips, then farther. Each journey was a practice in autonomy, in joy. I hiked a coastal trail, stood on a cliff at dawn, let the wind whip through my hair. No one stood beside me taking photos, and yet I had never felt less alone. One spring morning, an envelope arrived at the studio, a wedding invitation from Daniel and Emily. I set it aside without opening it. Later I slid it into a drawer, not out of bitterness but because it no longer mattered. Their choices had led me here, to this life I had built. In a strange way, I was grateful. Sometimes clients ask about my scars. I roll up my sleeves and tell them the story, not with shame but with pride. These, I say, are proof that I lived, and that I left. Their eyes soften. They see not just a designer but a survivor who understands transformation. And so the story ends where it began, with me looking straight into the camera, scars visible, voice steady. Pain can end you or begin you. He thought I'd forgive, but I left forever, and that was the beginning of my real life. The screen fades to black, and in the quiet after my words, viewers can feel it, the truth that sometimes walking away is not the end but the start of everything.